Welcome. We are thrilled that you're here for this event, the GM 2020 Tipping Forward event. We are about 2 years on this journey. About 2 years into the GM 2020 journey, many of you have been engaged. I can't see your faces because of the bright lights here, so I don't know exactly who all's in the room right now, but you've been engaged, and you've been engaged in multiple activities. We started with the launch event, again, almost 2 years ago. We followed up with a series of collabs, and many of you have been engaged in working on things that really even help to enhance our product, not to mention the work environment and engagement opportunities for employees and so on. We've had TED Talks. We've had lots of other events like a summit, and now we're doing the Tipping Forward review. This is actually a derivative of what we once called Pechakuchu. I can never say it right, but it's basically, how do you share dynamic presentations in very short intervals. And that's what I'm going to do. So let me get us jump-started on why did we start this journey? Why is this important? Why are we here? What's this GM 2020 thing all about? And I have to start with a statement that Mary often makes. And she recently, and has multiple times, as other leaders have said, say that we will see more change in this industry in the next 5 years than we have in the last 50 years combined. Think about that statement for a moment. We will see more change in the next 5 years than we have in the last 50. Does that seem rapid, radical, fast to you? What this is all about is how do we truly tap into the potential of this organization to deal with the disruption that we know is on the horizon. You only need to look at what's happening with the non-competitors of the automotive industry stepping in to know that something radical is about ready to happen to this industry. Google, Apple, we certainly know they're playing in this space. Samsung, Sony, other technology firms are starting to play in the automotive industry, and something radical is happening. Tesla made a very dramatic announcement today about hiring a large group of employees, and we should be paying attention because something is happening and we are poised for disruption. So the question really is, how do we position ourselves for that? GM 2020 is really simply about this. How do we co-create the future today? Starting today, how do we come together, co-create the future today, and truly unleash the enormous latent potential throughout this organization? That's why we launched it. That's why we've continued to iterate on different initiatives throughout GM 2020, and that's what it's all about. And what I thought I would start with today is the theory behind that, because the theory behind it starts with some basic research, and I thought I would share just briefly what that looks like and how this all seems together. So I'll start with, I've been part of a research team that has been interested in one question around how is it that bold innovation and bold change happens inside of existing complex organizations, and what is it about ideas that help them to garner attention and momentum within an organization and manifest into commercial successes or bold changes, and yet seemingly equally fit ideas stay latent, stay hidden, stay sort of buried deep inside of organizations. And that's the core question. It's a core question that a small research team embarked upon asking and answering about 8 years ago. And since then, this research team has interviewed over 400 different leaders across 40 complex organizations and have found some pretty interesting things. And that's what I want to share with you, and that will lead into what we have been doing with GM 2020. And I'll start with this. The first thing is, unlike what you see with startups, where we get fascinated by the technology, we get fascinated by the disruptive technologies that exist, in complex organizations, technology is important, but the reality is change is much more of a social phenomena than a technological one. So change, bold change, rapid innovation is much more of a social phenomena than a technological one. And let me share some insights from the research that lead us to where we are with GM 2020. So going out, looking at these companies, here's what we discovered. Every single organization that was observed and evaluated had two things. One was what you see behind me, and that is an operational system. Nothing pivotal, nothing dramatic about that. But this is the way that an organization gets work done every single day. These are the routines, formal procedures, practices. This is how we get paid. This is important. It's how we deliver services critically and on time to our customers. Every organization, even those that weren't innovative, I might add, had a second dimension as well, and that's what they call the entrepreneurial system. That's where ideas originate from. That's where new creativity emerges from. That's where somebody has a spark of an insight, some really dramatic idea, and they continue to play with it as part of the entrepreneurial system and try to manifest it. Here's the challenge, right? The people who are here in the entrepreneurial system, the creators, the innovators, you know them, you are them in many regards, hate the stuff at the top, don't they? They hate it. If only the operational system would go away. How many of you have said, if only GM would loosen up a little, we could be bold and provocative about the things that we're doing or about our ideas. If only we could loosen up the rigor, the formality, the hierarchy, whatever you want to call it, the bureaucracy, then we could be bold and provocative, right? Everyone says it. Here's the problem. I call it the innovator's hypocrisy. You, in that entrepreneurial system, need the operational system to scale. The difference between us and startups is the reality is we've got to scale, we've got to operate with precision, and we've got to deliver flawlessly to our customers that already exist. So the trick with the companies that were successful as opposed to those that weren't is something that comes in between the two, and not every organization had this, but those that were capable of adapting, innovating, and changing multiple times had a third dimension, which we call the adaptive space. The adaptive space acts as a bridge. It's a bridge that takes all the great, original ideas from the local entrepreneurial system and pulls them into the operating system so that we can fund them, scale them, and deploy them out across a market in order to be successful across time. Organizations that figured out how to continually reinvent themselves and how to be poised for disruption. And that's what I want to spend a little more time talking about the dynamics of. So how does that happen? What does that look like? Well, it looks a little bit like this. Let me take you back to your everyday life as innovators, as originators, as change agents. And this is how it usually starts. It starts in this entrepreneurial system. You've got an idea, right? You just had this brilliant idea. No one else has ever thought of this idea before. It's original. It's a game changer. You got to get other people to listen. What's the first thing you do? Well, you work in your local environment with the people that you interact with, your friends, we'll call them, every single day. And what do? You share it with them. You iterate with them. You say, hey, I've got this great idea. You should pay attention. You listen, you share, you iterate. Why do you share it with them? Because you trust them. You know that you can work with them. You know that we can iterate and make it better. And then the next thing you do, once you build up some confidence that this idea is actually good, is you take it to the next level and you share it with a few other friends. These aren't your closest friends. These are people that you trust a little, but not a lot. But you share it with them, right? Here's the problem. Oftentimes, this is where bold ideas stop. Bold ideas stop right here in the local environment, because the next thing that needs to happen is we need to start thinking out across our local cluster, our subgroup, our work team, and we need to link up across other subgroups. Call them silos if you prefer. In the organizations that do adaptive space well, what they do is they bring different ideas, different people, different thoughts together in a routine basis, and they link them up. They connect them. They bring the different groups together in such a way that those ideas are connected across different groups, and then something really interesting happens, something unpredictable, you might call it, and that is that new ideas, new insights, after you link up, emerge. It's really bold ideas and innovation. The best way to think about it is bold ideas and innovations within complex organizations happen at the intersections of subgroups, clusters, and functions. So what do we need to do? We don't suffer, and many of you have heard me say this, we don't suffer from a deficit of ideas, do we? We suffer from an inability to be able to link up, connect up those ideas, and that's what GM 2020 is all about. How do we actually create the adaptive space for people to come together socially so that it's a social phenomena and connect idea to idea, connect insight to insight, and actually generate new insights as a result of that to make this company the incredible organization that it can be. And that's what we're trying to do. The reality is, that sounds easy, but it gets hard. It gets hard. The reality is, eventually you hit conflict. Eventually something happens, and what happens is you hit conflict and something emerges. Somebody disputes your idea. You know, you run into some divisiveness. Somebody says this, right? Yeah, we did that 10 years ago. That will never work here. Or, yeah, how are you ever going to get that funded? Or that can't happen with this customer base. Whatever it happens to be, we hit tension in the system. Those organizations that continue to be bold and provocative and innovative respond to that tension through what we call an adaptive response. They work around it. They go find a sponsor at some point in time in the network who will support their idea after it's been configured, built, and tested to some extent. And it's at that point that we begin to formalize it, scale it, and then we can take it across the broader organization. And that is what this is all about. That is the dynamic that we're trying to create. And exactly what we're trying to do is we have entrepreneurs inside this organization that are tremendous originators. We've got tremendous patents across this organization on the product side, and we've got great talent that we brought into the organization. The question is, how do we build the bridge? And through these events in GM 2020, many of the ones that I've mentioned already and now tipping forward, it's really about creating the social platform to bring those ideas together so that we can be bold and provocative in the future. Simply stated, I thought I had to use a creative slide somewhere in this deck. Simply stated, it's about this. If you invite people, engage people into the challenge, if you engage them in the challenge, they will be moved to act, and radical things will happen across the organization. I thank you for being here today, and I thank you for joining on this journey that we are only in the beginning stages of